Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, Restless Tribes. So, this book would have been purchased new for $16.95. I purchased this for significantly cheaper than that at a used bookstore in Albuquerque. It is a signed copy, and it looks like there's a stamp in the bottom part of the cover page that has the website for this author. So I'm going to show that page as well. That stamp, Restless Tribes, seems not originally printed there. This book was printed in 2004. And the copyright info says, similar incarnations of these essays have been published in The Sun, Outpost, Grand Tour, The Korea Times, The News and Observer, Weekly Alibi, The Independent, Men's, and Traveler's Tales, China. This is a relatively short book, only about 225 pages long, but it is a book about this man's travels across the world. The table of contents actually exposes that pretty quickly. The places seem to be Honduras, Alaska, the Philippines, Iraq, China, Korea, Vietnam, India, Tanzania, Venezuela, Ireland, and that seems to be it so far as the locations of these stories. There's a funny anecdote here that opens the chapter on the Philippines. This story happened in 1995, and the chapter opens with an italicized anecdote. The second time I met President Gerald Ford was at a small Carolina college in 1986. He sat a few feet away from me in the parlor of Elon College's Holland House, frowning and looking too big for his overstuffed chair. I edged closer to the fire and thought about Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos sunning their fat asses in Hawaii. Why did we let them in? I wanted to ask Ford. I was there when you met them. Don't you remember what scum they were? Instead, I turned to him and said, "Last time I saw you was more than 10 years ago. We were in Manila. I didn't know exactly what you were doing there because I was only in the 3rd grade, but I do remember sensing some hostility towards Americans. Did you get the same feeling?" A gaping smile spread across his face. He laughed and said, "I don't think I knew what I was doing there either." His smile subsided as he added, "But yes, I did get that feeling." This person seems to have been a traveler, perhaps even the child of a diplomat that was moving across all over the place. About the author, for example, explains that he was born in China and raised in North Carolina. So to have been born in China, it's likely his parents were traveling all over the world. And, 3rd grade in the Philippines as well. That doesn't happen to sedentary people. But what this story entails is the author looking into these medicine men-like people called bubble men that live in the Philippines. They do their work in the Philippines, and they're doing like folk magic in a way. So this part involves a man named Cedro, the bubble man. Cedro is 88 years old. Mostly he's thin, but has ropey muscles and a rounded out belly. He has at least one gold tooth and a head of thick dark hair. Round tortoise-shell glasses obscure much of his weathered face. He turns off the stereo, takes a seat in a corner, and spits in my general direction. 3 neighbors in their late teens or early 20s are lingering in the opposite corner. Cedro seems indifferent to their presence as well as mine. He doesn't even bother to make so much as eye contact with anyone. I ask what sort of powers he has. Rudy starts to answer without consulting him. He gets his powers from a god or some kind of devil. At that, one of the neighbors begins to laugh. "It's not a god or a devil," she says. "It's Dili Parihas Nato, the one not like us." "A kind of spirit?" I ask. "You could say so," she says with confidence. Cedro proceeds to do some like folk medicine, folk magic. The author is definitely questioning. He's very curious about what he sees, but he's not doing so in an insulting way, which is always a nice thing to see in these kinds of stories. It's very white man curiosity in a way, but in a respectful tone. He then proceeds to meet Juan the Bubble Man and is told by that Rudy that there are many Bubble Men. 5 or maybe 4. One I think is dead. Anyway, we should go. He is waiting for us. Alternatively, when he goes to China, he's there as a teacher. He opens that chapter, it says 1989 to 1990. Shortly after the Tiananmen massacre of June 4th, 1989, I prepared for a teaching assignment in Xiping, China. Though ready for a year of sacrifices, I could not have anticipated the list of items that I was forbidden to bring into their country. Weapons, drugs, pornography, political and religious propaganda, and mountain bikes. The last item ripped my breath away. How was I to survive a year without my trusty Cannondale? This faithful bike, which I had christened Betsy, had carried me safely across the greater part of North Carolina's mountains, and beaches and everything in between. She had delivered me from potentially deadly encounters with mountain ledges and railroad trestles, vicious copperheads and packs of feral dogs, hillbilly deputies, and the broadside of countless minivans. This wasn't just a bike. She was a bold machine forged from American sweat and steel, a crimson chariot that knew her way around Tor and Vale. But it was precisely this kind of flashy craftsmanship that the Chinese party sought to hide from the people. The word people is capitalized. Our new breed of bikes, mountain bikes in particular, threatened to disgrace the Chinese model, the design of which changed little since 1950, when Huo Baoji first unveiled his carefully crafted Fei Ji, a classic model based on the 1932 English Raleigh Roadster. Alas, my trusty Betsy would have to stay behind and await my return. Then he goes on in later pages. His first order of business was to secure a bicycle, and he went basically everywhere. He rode at a breakneck speed he'd grown accustomed to while racing to classes over the past 4 years. As the only white boy in town, I got stares, he says. Imagine a Mongolian warrior in Des Moines running his fool head off everywhere he went. That's how ridiculous I looked. He goes on. He has a lot of good experiences in China. He doesn't realize that he can call the home in a certain area, so he travels to a nearby town to go and talk to family over the phone. He goes to dance parties and experiences what those are like in China at the end of the 80s and in the early 90s. He takes pictures of China as much as he can, and then I guess at one point he offers to trade his camera for some Chinese soldiers' handguns, which they agree to. He proceeds to take pictures with his girlfriend at the time, Jessica, and those pictures are kind of goofy, as he says. This guy, while in China, experiences a lot of parts of China you don't see in the news. Very homey, very folksy, very political, very different is a good way to put it. It's like that throughout this book. He goes places, he's trying to find something, he's learning about something, he's volunteering, helping with something. He's always working some kind of project. But when he travels, he's there to be inquisitive, to learn, to experience the people that call that land, that nation, home. So it's a very fun book. Each chapter is only about 10-20 pages long. Some are shorter, some are longer. It's all a good collection of stories. Similar to his time in the Philippines, when he goes to Tanzania, he's talking with a witch doctor. He learns how that different cultures' medicinal beliefs work. He works with translators that laugh at the witch doctor. He works with people that are supportive of the witch doctor. So the Tanzania story happens during the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And what is revealed is that allegedly this witch doctor has medicine that can sustain a person's constitution, their vitality, despite HIV. But he also goes on to say that doctors, these witch doctors, are often transmitters of HIV as well. Restless Tribes is a book about travel. It is a book about experiences, and it is a book that you can really live vicariously through this person's stories. A lot of the stories happened before I was born, and yet they give a glimpse into the 80s and 90s world that I just never got to experience. I know the 2000s and the 2010s, at least in the Western world, the part of the world that has the internet. I don't know much about the part of the world that doesn't have the internet. And I think a lot of these stories are about those parts of the world that even now don't necessarily have access to the open internet that Americans do. It's special. I think he could probably have these travels, these journeys in a more modern era, and the stories would probably be very similar. Some of the bubblemen might be dead, some of the witch doctors might be dead, but they would be there nonetheless. And that is what these stories convey, is that these parts of the world are immortal, and those cultures, those experiences are always going to be there. It's up to you to experience them. My name is Wild Stag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.